Hi, 2001 is in full swing, well, at least in this video series it is, and we have few interesting games to check out. So let's do just that. Etherlords is one of the most unusual and unique releases of 2001. It's a collectible card game and turn-based strategy mixture that feels a bit like an odd and possibly forbidden love child between Heroes of Might and Magic and Magic the Gathering. A love child that's a sum of all parts, and one that perhaps while not outgrowing its parents, is still incredibly interesting and well made. So the titular Ether in the Etherlords is a synonym for magic, and each of the races present in the game specializes in a different kind of it. They are divided depending on the Ether color, so either black, red, green or blue. On the face value, Etherlords plays a lot like Heroes of Might and Magic, so you have a large world map on which your heroes move around conquering castles, seeking rare artifacts, fighting enemies and capturing strategic locations. And there are smaller, tactical combat 3D maps on which turn-based combat encounters play out. Set combat, however, is nothing like Heroes of Might and Magic and centers around players taking turns to cast spells from the cards that they hold. These spells can be summons, enchantments, attacks and a whole plethora of other magic effects. The variety of cards is definitely not a problem with Etherlords. I mean, sure, the longer you play, the easier for you it will be to have a certain favorite cards or card combos to collect and use, so you will use a smaller subset of these, but there should always be some new and interesting ones to add or consider adding to your deck. Battles are very reminiscent of Magic the Gathering, as the summoned creatures attack the opposing player, and him/her can decide to use their creatures to defend the attack, and a very few spells can directly target enemy creatures. Most of these creatures have their own skills too, and keeping them in mind and using them optimally and at the right time is a key to success. In fact, all the strategies that you use in Magic will translate near one-to-one to Etherlords, and prior knowledge with how Magic's battles work mechanically will be of serious benefit to new Etherlords players. Winning battles brings XP, and these bring levels, and the money earned can be used to purchase new and better spells. Story-wise, the Lords of Chaos, Vitality, Kinetics and Synthesis, so the users of 4 Ether colors that I've previously mentioned, compete for the dominance, for the power, for Ether. And each of them dreams of defeating the White Lord, the Master of Ether, so that they could take his place and rule over the land. All in all, if you like RPGs, card games or fantasy-themed strategies, chances are that you'll love Etherlords too. The world is threatened by the evil Morbus and his deadly dark tribe. He aims to change it, the world not the tribe is perfectly evil and nefarious the way it is, and turn it into a wasteland for his own benefit. Naturally, he'll stop at nothing to do just that. So, the main campaign of the game deals with that, with your combating of the Morbus's evil plans. The winning conditions require you to destroy his dark fortress, but that's obviously easier said than done and will take you quite a while. Other than that, Settlers 4 comes with 3 smaller and shorter campaigns, each for different of 3 available races, so Romans, Vikings and Mayans. And these do not take Morbus and his dark tribe into serious consideration. Settlers 4 is naturally a 4th installment into a long-running real-time strategy kingdom-building series, and objectively speaking, probably a better game than these that came before. I say objectively, cause for me, Settlers 2 Gold Edition was and always will be the best part ever made. Anyway, for those who'd never played any of the Settlers games, let me try to explain. In essence, Settlers 4, or any other really, is a balancing act, and one that requires smart planning and a lot of micromanagement. So you have to erect structures, each with very specific function that will allow your kingdom to grow, prosper and be well defended. In the same time, remembering that everything in the game is interconnected and requires keeping a constant eye on. So for instance, if you want to make bread, so that your citizens won't starve, you'd have to build a bakery. But bakery alone can do jack shit, because it needs water and flour. First, it's rather simple to get, a well can supply it when built, but second, well, best we start at the beginning and not the end of this sample chain. For the flour to somehow magically come into existence, you need a farmer. So you have to build a farm, making sure that there's plenty enough empty space around it for the farmer to grow crops, and if there isn't, because there are trees for instance polluting the otherwise beautiful view of the surrounding plains, erecting a woodcutter's hut who would then cut them would be a prior requirement. But for the sake of this video, let's assume that in this particular case, there are no trees near your potential future farm. So the farmer has to plant the crops, wait for them to grow, and then when they're mature, harvest them. But all that is just a half of the way, I'm afraid. As to make flour out of them, they still need to be carried to the windmill, which hopefully in your infinite wisdom you've built in the meantime. Windmill will then turn them into flour, which then needs to be carried to the bakery, where baker will take his sweet time with it, making that crusty, hot and tasty sourdough bread. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just the simplest of dozens of interdependencies. Oh, and since I failed to mention it earlier on, I will do so now. Watching these tiny workers build all of the buildings brick by brick and plank by plank is just enchanting. The Incredible Machine Even More Contraptions is virtually an identical game to year prior's Return of the Incredible Machine. And I mean it, it's not similar, it's identical, differing in nothing notable, only with, well, even more contraptions. It includes over 250 puzzles, 50 of which the so-called tutorial puzzles are the same as in the earlier game. Other than that, the remaining ones are entirely new and unique. Same as with every other entry in the series to date, Even More Contraptions is really fun to play around with. Now, with that out of the way, at least for those who do know what the Incredible Machine series are, let me explain it to those who'd never heard of it. It's basically a Rube Goldberg machine simulator. As in each stage you're given an objective to complete, and it's usually something very simple, like making sure that a particular ball falls into a particular bucket, or the mouse is fed cheese, or even that some objects are moved from point A to point B. It's rarely more than that, but as easy as this sounds, making it happen, especially in those latter stages, may require a few attempts and really getting your noggin going. So to create a working and more importantly completing the task at hand machine naturally requires different components. And for each stage you're getting a selection of seemingly random items from more than 100 different ones included in the game. And this can be a whole manner of different oddities, like bricks, bowling balls, scissors, ropes, pulleys, cheese, yeah, cheese, like the one on your pizza or pasta, candles, lighters, rockets, pipes, monkey-powered motors, you've heard that right. The point is, if you can think of something that could find its way into a Rube Goldberg contraption, chances are that it's in the game already, and sooner or later you'll get to do it. Anyway, you have to arrange the objects on the screen in a way that would make completion of your task possible. So finding the right combination of these to get the chain going is a key to success. And also very satisfying to observe it play out when all of the items connect and work as a singular system, especially in some of those more demanding stages. Difficult or tough levels, it's irrelevant, The Incredible Machine is a fantastic game and a time well spent. More importantly, it's a title that's very universal and can be enjoyed by gamers of all ages. Serious Sam is anything but serious. In fact, it's so over-the-top silly crazy and out there that I see its humor and craziness as being a potential detractor from playing for some of the gamers. Even I despised it for a long while and considered it stupid. So was I, so perhaps that's the reason for it. Anyway, if you know what it is and what to expect from it, there's a way to appreciate its insane gameplay loop. Fortunately, I know exactly what to expect from it and I can appreciate it for what it is and not for what I might have wanted it to be at some point. Serious Sam is a super fast-paced chaotic first-person shooter that placed all of its bets on fast action rather than the story or tactical combat. In fact, the enemies come at you so fast in such vast numbers and from all sides that you will hardly ever get a second of a breather to consider a reason for you being in ancient Egypt and shooting everything around you. Instead, you'll be pulling on that trigger maniacally, sending hundreds of bullets each and every way and putting equally as many creatures into eternal Z's. The action movie-like gameplay will take you throughout many different Egyptian locales, palaces, temples, cities and the likes, and you'll be going through them guns blazing, leaving an alarming number of bodies behind. Most weapons are an FPS standard armament, so a knife, pistols, shotguns, chain guns and rocket launchers among others, but there are a few interesting choices between them too, like a handheld cannon that naturally shoots cannonballs, effectively turning you, I mean Sam, into a walking and talking pirate ship in Egypt. I know that it's a weird comparison, but it's also a weird game, so it kinda fits. The enemies that you'll face are definitely something special and unlike those found in other games too. They don't wait around for you in different parts of the levels camping like noobs, but keep teleporting in near your location, which means that you're always under a constant threat. So, seeing an army of half scorpions, half spiders going at you, headless bombers running aimlessly, or an army worth of bulls charging ahead is nothing out of ordinary in Serious Sam. It's also not particularly special to dispose of them in a surgical precision with 1,000 red-hot bullets. Serious Sam is a crazy game, overflowing with even crazier action, and if you're someone who can ignore the fact that its story is downright stupid, enemies look out of place, and huge-ass bosses even more so, you're in for a crazy good time. Yes, 3 crazies in one sentence, a new personal best. And yeah, as sad as it may sound, I am keeping score. Story-wise, the Earth is invaded by the evil aliens, led by the nefarious and appropriately to the game's team named villain, Mental. And since their forces are way too much for even our buff hero, he must travel back in time to ancient Egypt times to defeat Mental and his armies then and there. Serious Sam is not an ambitious or a deep game, but if you're stressed out, sad or angry, there's hardly anything better to let off some steam. Commandos 2 Men of Courage is a follow-up to the original game and a much better title in basically all that it offers, from graphics through level and mission design all the way to the features. So let's try to quickly cover all of that in order. The presentation got a considerable bump up, especially with the game's new and now fully 3D engine that allows for seamless rotation and zooming in and out of action for a much better overview of your area of operations. And the maps are now rather varied too. You'll fight in and around submarine base, fun, you'll visit Japanese Pacific Islands, and that sounds like a plan for a holiday, but I suppose very few of you got to empty series of Max on your holidays, still, it's fun too. And you cut through mounds of knee-deep snow, and you'll even ride an elephant, among others. Fun and fun. And all that is just a few out of many interesting and beautifully depicted locations. And since we're on the subject, the levels are now much more interactive. You can get in and out of the buildings, shoot through windows, throw grenades to clear rooms, free allied soldiers and then instantly use them to help you on a mission, use bottles and cigarettes to distract enemies and even pick up and use their weapons. Sounds like a lot of fun, right? Well, I'm honestly just barely scratching the surface. While Commandos 2 is still a real-time tactical team-based strategy set during World War, with all that it entails, thanks to all those changes and improvements, it feels much more action-oriented than the original. And especially because many of the missions are based on famous historical movie or book-inspired operations, so they are usually daring and exciting to take part in. It also means that they're no longer simple go and destroy first and usually have many interconnected objectives, making them feel like some of those best World War II movies. It seems that the devs wanted to pack Commandos 2 with as many features as they could, so that it would feel like a proper sequel. And it does. You have many more interactions at your disposal now, and you can steal uniforms and weapons, climb and swing from cables, jump from windows and even use different vehicles. There are 9 unique commandos included, each with their own specialty and skills, and while it's fun to use them the way they were intended, I can't overlook a rather big omission in the game's design. Namely, most missions can be completed without the use of any of those special abilities. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are very, very useful, but most of the time, not necessary. Oh, and there's a seductress and a dog for you to control now, which, you know, is extra fun. There are realistic, even if pre-scripted, weather effects in Commandos 2, and while these are just an eye candy, by god are they a nice candy. And finally, the absolute best thing about the game, at least from where I'm sitting, and it's a rather uncomfortable old chair, multiplayer. Yep, you guessed it right. You and a buddy, or your best gal, if she cares for games such as this one, can co-op in Commandos 2, completing the missions together. Whether you like the first game or not, I think that the second deserves a chance, as it may be something that you'll enjoy. So, give it a chance. I loved 1995's terrible, awful and so cringe movie Hackers with John Lee Miller and Angelina Jolie. Its story is rather out there, the acting is questionable at best, and the depiction of hacking is so 90s it couldn't have been any more if it tried. And many movies after did try. Also skateboarding villain, I mean, come on, how quote-unquote hip they were trying to make him. Hip, I've not used the word in a long minute now. Whatever you think about the movie, and despite all of its shortcomings, I loved it to bits and still do. Because it represents the dream that I had as a kid that was never fulfilled. So when Uplink somehow found its way to my computer in 2001, I was instantly hooked. Also, not very good at it, but it never stopped me from trying. You could say that Uplink is a fictional hacker simulator / management game, and one that feels a lot like that 1995 movie. Like most good games in either of the two genres, it starts you off small, with a very basic computer setup and simple jobs. Steal some files, remove data remotely, erase any traces of you being there, basic stuff really. But as you get better and better, earn money and reputation and upgrade your setup, both in terms of software and hardware, you will be able to take much riskier and dangerous, but also considerably better paying jobs. As a master hacker, that you will no doubt become in no time, you'll have access to many cool sounding, but not necessarily true to life tools, so stuff like password guessers, cryptographic attack tools, voice print fakers or proxy bypassers to name a few. And they all will be your tools of distraction. I mean tools of trade. Doing what you're doing naturally attracts a lot of attention from cops and other entities, so having a proper defense setup and a good security practices, making sure to cover your tracks is a must. There are 3 types of, well, I don't know what to call them here really, but let's say missions in Uplink, randomly generated ones, and it's the ones that you can pick to earn money, boost up your hacking rep, the titular so-called Uplink rating, and these are easily what you'll be doing the most of the time. Then there are the storyline missions, which unlock one by one after a certain time has passed and you've reached a particular uplink levels. The story is not very in your face at the beginning of the game, but will get progressively more and more important as you play, and eventually you will have to make a very important to the entire game world's choice. But that's not something we should get into detail here today. And finally, the secret missions. Ooh, scary. They are unrelated to the main story, but unlike the random ones, they are also handcrafted, usually much more interesting and challenging, and finding them requires you to fulfill certain requirements. Other than that, Uplink is a rather open game, meaning you can make your own hacks, pick your own targets and earn money and fame from that too, which naturally adds a lot to its longevity. You're obviously not the only hacker in the world of Uplink, and there are many others simulated, doing their own thing and often even working against you or actively trying to find you too. It's fantastic. I am always surprised when people tell me that they've never heard of Uplink, as it was such a big part of my childhood. But since it was not a triple or even AA release and featured close to no graphics at all, short of a simple user interface, some icons and maybe an occasional picture here and there, I can sorta understand it going under everyone's radar. Also, first retail version was buggy as hell, plagued with many graphical and technical issues, and it required a minute for the patches to come out to be fully and safely playable. Today it's in the best state it could be, so if anything I said sounded even remotely fun to you, make sure to track it down and give it a go. The rage is what I succumb to whenever my boss's wife walks into our office. She's a monster, a creature of the dark, nay, a devil spawn that ascended to her from lava-filled always burning depths of her hell mansion to bring sadness, suffering and death to our world. She is also one that requires a champion to beat her, a hero to take the mantle of a savior and down the slimy beast once and for all for the benefit of all mankind. But since I'm anti-violence, it is not going to be me. I may be a witness, a bard to tell a tale of a heroic brave that saved us all, to sing it to the crowds hungry for the stories of courage and epic battles, but nothing more. I keep my rage, my anger within, and turn it into ulcers, reminding me daily of how much I despise her. Quite coincidentally, Rage is also a 3D beat-em-up in a vein of classics like Streets of Rage. In fact, Rage's characters are clearly inspired by those found in Sega's classic, in moves more than in looks. And honestly, as inspirations go, the devs couldn't have picked much better. Unlike the older game though, Rage is entirely 3D and uses the modern presentation to the best of devs' capabilities. Which, well, we'll get to that in a minute. You can move in all directions, punch, kick, jump and run, hold other characters, pick up weapons and items, and even break parts of the scenery. It's well, mostly fun. Rage's characters represent typical for the genre split between fast but weak, strong but slow, and one in between. Well, two in between in this particular case, but you know, potato, potato, rage, anger, fury. Anyway, Rage seems to have all the makings of a great fighter, but one, camera work, which in those early 3D third-person games was often an issue, and here, from time to time, it's just a nightmare. It focuses on what it deems important and not necessarily on your character being mauled somewhere at the edge of the screen by two bald dudes roundhouse kicking you into non-existence. It's a nuisance, but I wouldn't say that it's a game breaker, more like something to get used to and find a way to work around. Rage is composed out of 6 stages of 2 or 3 pretty very designed sections each. If it was a bit more polished, it could have been much more fun, but as it is, it's an average brawler. Definitely worth trying out, but average. Oh, and there's a story, because of course there is one, because each beat-em-up requires a reason for all the punches and kicks to take place, right? Okay, so Bruce's girlfriend Sarah falls into coma after unknowingly being served a new and experimental drug in a bar owned by Mafia. How terrible, right? So Bruce and his friends Max and Lisa and Sarah's ex-hunk of a boy toy Alfred set out to take on the Mafia in hand-to-hand combat. And I gotta say that I love their spirit. I mean, everyone knows how great of an idea it is not only not to bring a gun to a gunfight, but also forget the knife too. Either way, they go in with their fists clenched, hoping for the bodies to not shoot. Silly. Tribes 2. It's hard to appear to know something when you clearly don't. So, I suppose it's best to come clean, and I'm gonna do just that. I've never played Tribes 2, so all I will tell you about it is what I found online. It's a team-based first-person shooter primarily made for online play, which is also a reason why my experience with it is non-existent. I never used to play these online shooters back then, and I hardly ever do today, though still more often than I did in the past. Gameplay comprises of traditional for the genre games of assaults on the enemy fortresses, capture the flags, protecting of a particular area, and all other well-known to online shooter enthusiasts modes, but very heavily focusing on teamwork. Since the maps in the second installment are rather vast, using vehicles is often a must. And when I say vehicles, I don't only mean cars, cause there's more of these, and some of them like bombers for instance can truly be game changers during some of those more challenging shootouts. Old weapons received a facelift to fit within the new game's presentation standard, and there are a few new ones added too, so the fans of the first title will no doubt find them fun to use along their faves from Tribes 1. Well, first Tribes I should say really, it's not like it had a number plastered next to its name. While the game is quote-unquote just a shooter, number of the roles a player could take during each of its matches was quite broad, and you could specialize in being a sniper, pilot, defender, or in deployment of strategic equipment among others, so having many role choices and different dynamically changing life-changing in an online play combat scenarios, meant that Trapes 2 was a game with a lot to learn and a rather steep entry threshold if matched against experienced gamers. Still, as with most online titles, perseverance is rewarded, and the longer you spend at it, the better you should get. While I may have not played it myself, I gotta say that for the title released in 2001, Trapes 2 looks rather nice. I honestly don't know if it can still be played online today, as it used to run on Sierra's proprietary online system called 2001's, but if there are still fans of it, I'm sure they would have found a way to enjoy it. So if you wanna give it a go, a little research on how to have it run today may be necessary. Well, unless you're fine with playing against bots, but I never found it to be fun. Oh my god, I just can't not do it. I shouldn't, but I will. Dino Crisis 2 is a state of the mind I get into whenever my boss's wife comes to work. She's a relic of the ancient times when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, and she definitely caused more crises over the thousands of years of her demonic life than she solved, both personally and professionally. I mean, I could tell you such ridiculous stories of the imaginary betrayals, erratic and near-maniacal aggressive behaviors, or even downright insane choices that she'd made and followed through, even when proved wrong, you wouldn't believe. And yet, not only they did happen, but they also still do. Occasionally perhaps, but they do. That's a subject for when I'm out of the hell though, and the Dino Crisis 2 that we're going to be talking about today is a pretty sweet third-person survival/shooter horror. Well, no, not really horror, more like Jurassic Park catastrophe simulator, as there are no demons, undead or monsters of any kind anywhere in the game. But tons upon tons of dinos, quite literally too, as they're all rather bottom heavy. Well, most of them are at least, as the T-Rex has surprisingly large head and his center of the gravity may lie a bit higher. Anyway, Dino Crisis 2 is mechanically very similar to Alone in the Dark or Resident Evil games, in that the backgrounds are all static and pre-rendered, and only characters, dinos and items are 3D real-time rendered models. While both protagonists Regina and Dylan start with just a gun and a melee weapon, soon enough they come across other, deadlier and much more fun to use, stronger weapons. I mean, you can only imagine how fun it is to run around with a flamethrower or a rocket launcher when facing dinos. Well, actually, it's probably not that fun at all. I mean, the game is, but the scenario, ooh, I wouldn't want to be in our hero's shoes. Anyway, story-wise, the game is set on a remote island where the secret research facility is located and works non-stop 24/7 on a so-called third energy project. And as we all know very well, the first energy is electricity and the second is the power of love. So the third has got to be something epic. Well, as epic as it might have been, we're not ever learning anything even remotely useful about it, at least not initially, as due to some unpredictable occurrences, the entire research facility is transported back in time to the dinosaur era. And not the fun one with all the herbivores, butterflies, fruit, clean air and crystal lakes, the one with predators galore, and all of them are really hungry for some reason. Given the rather unexpected events, a team of special unit soldiers is sent back in time to save the survivors, if there are any that is, and retrieve any and all research data, with the latter being the real and main objective. While Dino Crisis 2 may not be the most ambitious game, in neither its story nor gameplay, it's undoubtedly fun, and you will not get bored playing it if you're a fan of the survival shooter genre. With 5th episode out of the way, we're quite far into the 2001, and some of you may have already formed opinions about it. And to those of you, I have a question. How do you think the 2001 stacks up so far as compared to the previous years that we've covered? Is it similar, better, worse, or maybe you found this video by an accident and now wonder why is this odd foreigner asking you weird questions? Either way, let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too. It helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.